Chapter 21. Georgia's Announcement. Sitting in the dark on the pink wicker couch with collars perched on her finger, Amy was enjoying a quiet moment with her little friend. She had fed all the animals and birds on the hill, and Colors had once again tried to chase the others away. Now alone with her in the shadowy room, the happy bird flew up to Amy's shoulder and rubbed his head against her neck. He was completely affectionate, making soft chirping noises. "It's hard to share your best friends," Amy empathized sadly. "I understand, Colors. I know how you feel. You just want me all to yourself." Colors nibbled at her hair. With one finger, Amy stroked the downy feathers on the top of his head. "It's hard for you to believe that I can love you and Fredo and all the deer and—" At that moment, Amy's housemates came running up to the house noisily. Colors flew out of the window. "I have something to tell everyone," Georgia said, her voice bursting with happiness as she opened the door and rushed into the dim mansion. With plenty of giggling, Lily, Santa, and Dia followed her in. Looking up, Amy saw their dark outlines in the doorway and wondered what exciting news Georgia had to tell. All the girls gathered in the unlit living room, feeling their way over to sit on the big white, cozy rug. "So," Georgia began earnestly, "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I've decided that of all the nice guys in paradise, I love Zahir the best." The other girls clapped and cheered. Amy felt paralyzed. "Wonderful!" Santa shouted, jumping up. Clapping her hands and stamping her feet, she announced, "You have your man." "Zahir might be rather serious," Georgia smiled, "but he's such a great friend, and he knows so much about music. I love composing songs with him." With a sudden dry mouth and pain in her chest, Amy was stunned. It wasn't like she hadn't noticed that Zahir and Georgia were spending lots of time together and saying "I love you" to each other. Things hadn't worked out for her with Damien, and now her old friend had been chosen by someone else. Suddenly, she realized Zahir was a very close second choice. "Any other new likes?" Santa asked. "Zahir now belongs to Georgia," she said firmly. "Is there anyone else ready to declare who they love?" "I'm sure Vanitha has a new like," Lily giggled. "But she's not here to say anything." With sympathy, the petite girl added, "It's too bad your claim didn't work out, Amy. I feel sorry for you." In the hazy darkness, Amy could see that everyone was looking at her. Standing up unhappily, she said, "Good night, everyone." As tears welled up in her eyes, she felt her way over to the stairs. Running up to her room, Amy closed the door and dove into bed. She piled her pillows up on her head and cried quietly. "It's not fair," she thought. "All my choices are gone. How can this happen so quickly?" Whether she liked it or not, Amy knew they had made a rule, and she had foolishly agreed to it. She knew that Santa, her best friend, was determined to make everyone abide by it. The full impact dawned on Amy. "Now I can't even talk to Zahir on his own," she thought, horrified, sitting up in her bed. She had been waiting for a private opportunity to ask if he was okay, and that opportunity had never come. Weeks had gone by, and Zahir had always been with someone else, or she had. "Oh, why did I agree to this?" she asked herself as tears poured down her face. "Now I can't tell Zahir I love him or give him a hug if he's sad." Flopping down again, Amy cried miserably. Losing a choice made that choice much more desirable. There was a knock on her door. It was a familiar 5-beat knock that always meant Santa wanted to talk. "Come in," Amy mumbled, wiping the tears from her face. Santa opened the door and slowly made her way over in the dark. "Are you okay?" she whispered, sitting down on her bed. "It sounds like you're crying." Amy looked up. It was hard to see Santa in the darkness, but she could make out a soft outline. "Are you upset that Georgia has claimed Zahir?" her friend asked anxiously. "I thought you loved Damien." Not knowing what to say, Amy sobbed. "I don't know who I love the best, but Zahir was always one of my special friends, and now he can't be." "That's true," Santa agreed compassionately. "But Amy, it's only fair that we each get to claim one guy, and then he belongs to us. You should go back to surfing and reclaim Damien before anyone else does." "But I'm not a surfer," Amy protested miserably. "And what's the use of claiming someone who would rather be with someone else? That didn't last more than a day." Santa rubbed her back kindly, but the tone of her voice was one of gentle rebuke. "If you tried harder and didn't give up so easily, maybe Damien would still want to be with you. No, he's not a good choice for me, Amy sniffed decidedly. With a sigh, Santa struggled to find consoling words. Well then, maybe Georgia will change her mind, she said flatly, or maybe Zahir won't want to hang around with her. Maybe, Amy agreed, wiping her tears away. I just want to keep all my friends. I don't like this claim your man rule. I wish things could just stay the way they were. But it works for Nancy, Lily, and me, Santa reminded her. You and Damien were spending so much time together. What happened? Amy couldn't tell her friend about the near drowning, so she just said, I don't like surfing anymore or go-karting, and that's all that Damien does. But you've got to get back into it, Santa pleaded. I know you used to enjoy surfing and go-karting. Mistakes happen. We have to learn from them and do better, not give up. Two friends talked for a while longer, and then Santa gave Amy a big hug before she went back to her own room. Between the hug and the talk, Amy felt somewhat better. I'm glad I have Santa, she thought. She drifted off to sleep, even though she's enforcing a dumb rule. I know Santa cares about me. Chapter 22. Something Sweet. As much as she disliked the girls' rule, Amy tried to do the right thing. As her friends paired off and were frequently seen holding hands together, she found herself drawn to the farmland and the kitchen. Ever since she had taken on the task of preparing dinners, she had been seeing a lot of the farmers and storekeepers. They and the animals were becoming her new best friends. Santa was generally out every afternoon in the vegetable garden once her surfing lesson was over. Kenzie, Vahid, Charlie, and Bojo the beagle were often around. The gardens and orchard were in full production, and Tina and Yuyan had taken on the task of looking after the flowers when they weren't doing manicures or fixing minor cuts and scratches. Occasionally, Odin and Ponzi brought them piles of dirt in their carry carts, which the orchard girls were using to make new raised gardens in the center of their front yard. The Spider Heroes had recently decided that dirt was their favorite trading commodity. For every pile of soil that was delivered, they could each earn their daily meals. Lily tended to follow Ponzi around wherever he went, which meant that she spent a lot of her time in the North Forest near the train tracks. Occasionally, Amy heard her slip out of the house in the middle of the night. Often Lily was very tired in the morning. Damien was always hanging out with the Beach Boys or Venitha. Venitha and Santa were now surfing on the big waves and doing well. Damien was very proud of his new student and frequently boasted how quickly she was learning. He continued to pressure Amy to come back to the lake, but his new budding relationship left Amy feeling a deep sadness, a measure of envy, and even some haughty anger. Had the handsome young surfer remained her most special friend, perhaps she may have been convinced to get back on the board. And sadly, the whoosh label that he often directed her way didn't encourage her to overcome her fears. It only convinced her that she never would. One day, after helping Dia carry some new, beautiful bolts of material to the mansion, Amy showed up later than usual to get the vegetables. She had a few samples of brightly colored cloth to show Santa, knowing her friend would love them. Charlie was picking tomatoes alone. "Where's Santa?" Amy asked. "Surfing," Charlie muttered. "Oh, she's having a long lesson." "Every day," Charlie remarked, sounding unenthusiastic. "It's her favorite thing to do now," he sighed. "It was fun to surf," Amy recalled wistfully, "even if it is rather dangerous." "I don't mind her having fun," Charlie tried to explain. "It's just, I think she'd rather be with Lima than with me." "Oh," Amy said in surprise, noticing the hurt look in his eyes. "She's never said that to me." Shaking his head, Charlie changed the subject. "Hey, I found something extra special for you and Nancy to use," he told her. "Follow me." Amy was curious. She followed Charlie toward the chicken shed. "I kept seeing bees going in and out from under the roof," Charlie explained. "But I've been stung a few times, so I didn't want to bother them." Cringing, Amy looked around, hoping there weren't any other bees looking for someone to sting. "Don't worry," Charlie laughed. "Bees never last long in paradise. After about a month, they die, and then new ones are sent in on the drain." "Really? Every month?" Amy questioned. Yes, bees, fireflies, and butterflies don't last long. I find them dead in the gardens all the time. But the professor keeps making new ones. A batch of insects will come in soon, you'll see. A ladder was propped up against the shed. Charlie picked an apple as they walked past the trees. He climbed up the ladder, and with a big smile on his face, he pushed the fruit under the roof. It came back encrusted with a golden, sticky liquid. "Try this," he encouraged. "I think it's honey. You know the stuff that bees make?" Amy looked at it with wonder. They had read about this product in books, but she had never tasted it before. "Try it," he smiled. "It's so delicious." Amy bit into the coated apple, and her eyes opened wide with delight. She licked it. That is so amazing," she agreed. "Do you think you could bake something with this?" "Oh, yes," Amy replied. "I'll try something today." "Then we'll need something to put it in." "Vinitha's pots," Amy called out. "I'll go trade her for one." "Here, take these apples," Charlie offered, handing them to Amy as he pulled them off the tree. "I know Vinitha loves apples." Amy placed them in the long white shimmering shirt she was wearing, pulling the fabric around them like a bag. Thanking Charlie for the trade supplies, she ran to the creative shop. Vinitha was sitting outside, making beautiful pots from clay. Everyone had been trading for her tastefully decorated, useful items. Damien was mixing up paint for her. He wasn't out surfing. "I've brought you 10 apples to trade for a pot," Amy called out, forcing a smile. She still found it hard to see Vinitha and Damien together so much. "Which one would you like?" the dusky girl asked sweetly. "Do you like flowers or stripes?" "How about this one?" Damien offered, holding up a pot with geometric designs. "I painted it all by myself. Well, with a little help from my teacher," he said, smiling at Vinitha. "It was completely your design," she smiled back. The size was perfect. "Looks great," Amy said flatly, plunking the apples down on the table. All the loving looks between Damien and Vinitha were driving her crazy. She wanted to get away fast. Damien grinned. "My first customer," he bragged. Amy accepted the pot, and without another word, she ran back to the farmland. It took quite a while for Charlie and Amy to get all the sticky chunks of white, waxy honeycomb out from under the roof. It was loaded with drippy amber syrup. Amy held up the pot while Charlie used a broken building board to scoop it out. About halfway through, Colors swooped down to investigate the operation. He pecked at the sticky syrup and instantly fell in love. Amy had to run to pick a big leaf out of the garden to cover the pot. Her brightly colored lorikeet squawked noisily. He was not happy to be shut out. All the salad supplies had been faithfully loaded into the carry cart before Santa had gone to her lesson. A few ripe zucchinis lay on top. The delicious honeycomb was very heavy, so Charlie put the pot in his own carry cart and went with Amy to take everything to the store. The lorikeet flew along, raucously protesting as he swooped over the honey jar, attempting to move the leaf. Uncle Louis met them just after they had wheeled past the gardens. "Try this!" they both called out at once. Amy held her bird while Uncle Louis sampled the syrup with his finger. "Oh, that is so delicious," he said. "Amazing to think that bees can make this from flowers." When they all reached the store, Nancy and Milan were quite excited to try out the new treat. They dipped various fruits and vegetables in the honey and found that just about everything tasted fabulous covered in the sticky substance. "I need to get the bread ready for dinner," Nancy said, excusing herself. "Why don't we try some honey in your bread?" Amy suggested, her blue eyes sparkling with delight. She followed Nancy into the kitchen. "Sure," Nancy smiled, pinching off a large section of the raised dough and giving it to her. Amy rolled the dough flat and brushed it liberally with honey. Then she rolled it up, cut several bun-sized slices, and put them on a pan to rise. When she put the pan into the oven to bake, the aroma drove them all crazy. When it came out of the oven, golden, delicious, and sticky, it was hard for them to wait for it to cool down. Finally, Amy tried to get one out of the pan and discovered it was stuck. Leaving some of the bottom crust behind, she picked up one bun and divided it up. She, Nancy, and Milan all tried a piece. Their eyes lit up. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," Milan exclaimed. "Me too," Nancy agreed. "What should we call these?" "Honey buns," Amy suggested happily. Milan nodded, which meant he agreed. Rusty whined. He had been lying close by the sink where Milan allowed him to stay while they were preparing food. He looked up with his big, brown, pleading eyes. "Can I give him a piece?" Amy asked Milan, finding it hard to resist Rusty's eager expression. "Please don't," Milan replied as he mixed up eggs for broccoli quiche. "Rusty can hardly wait for regular bread. He might start stealing if he tastes honey buns." Amy looked over at the pleading dog. "I'm sorry, Rusty," she said. "Your master says no." Rusty slumped down dejectedly and dropped his muzzle onto his paws. Honey buns were a huge success. Not a crumb was left. Amy made them again for dinner the next day, except she made 4 times as many. Again, every single one was quickly devoured. A valuable collection of trading items began to pile up, and it was just for her. Chapter 24. Soaring. Almost everyone rushed off after dinner to race on Rose's Hill. As usual, the Tinies wanted to enjoy their evening before the sun went down. Odin and Ponzi reluctantly headed off with Uncle Louis for their weekly meeting. Once a week, Uncle Louis was also making time to talk to each of the Tinies. He didn't want anyone to be left out. Amy hoped her turn would come soon. Picking up the handles of her carry cart full of veggies and fruit scraps for the animals, Amy headed to the clearing with Charlie and Santa. She was delighted to have friends along. They were all on an exciting mission, hoping to see the Luna moth or one of the butterflies. It had been weeks since the solar lights had been used. Amy found the switch and stomped on the large button to turn them on. Each little arch light along the copper wire lit up in the darkness. An instant glow brightened the whole hill and was visible all across Paradise. Laying a blanket on the ground, the young people made themselves comfortable. As they fed the animals, they chatted about honey buns and salads, soups and quiche, and ways to make them better. After a while, they began wondering if the moth would ever appear. "What will we do if it comes?" Santa questioned. "Just watch it." "I'd like to see how close we can get," Charlie said, pulling some fruit out of the cart. "Maybe it will be friendly." "Maybe." "Oh, this is squishy," Charlie remarked, finding a chunk of rotten banana. Before he could say anything more, they all felt a light breeze. Looking up, they saw a large, fluttering shape pass overhead. "That's the Luna moth," Amy whispered. "It's even bigger now." Within seconds, the huge insect descended on the lights. As it crawled along the copper wire that joined everything together, the Tinies marveled over its feathery antennae and long, tail-like back wings. "So pretty," Santa marveled quietly. "And gigantic," Charlie added. For a few minutes, they watched the moth in complete awe of its beauty and grand scale. Finally, Amy was ready for the next challenge. "Let's try to touch it," she whispered. "I want to feel its furry thorax. Is it soft or prickly?" "Okay," Charlie said with eager anticipation. "I'll distract it with some food." He smeared rotten banana on a piece of leaf. Very, very slowly, they crept across the grass. Completely fixated on the lights, not once did the moth look up or even seem to notice that they were coming closer. Amy approached from the back, and Charlie towards the head as he held out the bait. Santa came in from the side. Soon they were close enough to reach the wings. Still, the moth took no notice of the banana bait, but fluttered slightly and stayed on the wire. Amy carefully walked between its long back wing extensions. Her eyes were focused on the fluffy body and her hand was extended. Finally, she got close enough to touch its back. She was surprised how wiry the hairs were. She gently ran her hand over a section of wing. Gliding one way, the wings were as smooth as Color's feathers. Running back the other way, they felt rough. Santa crept forward and touched it from the side. Instantly, the moth drew its wings up together, and Amy was delighted to find herself trapped in between the soft surfaces. Still, the moth didn't abandon the lights. That was when the teens heard voices. Zahir and Georgia were coming up the hill. "Where's the switch?" Zahir asked. "Just by that tree," they heard Georgia reply. "It's too bad that the Beach Boys hate the lights. I think they are so pretty." "It sure is nice to have them on when we're walking home." They could hear Zahir and Georgia searching for the switch. With a flutter, the moth moved slightly forward and opened its wings again. Amy moved forward with it. She touched the hair on the thorax again, enthralled by the sensation. Overhearing the discussion about turning off the light, she looked up at Charlie anxiously. "Do you think the moth will fly away if the lights go off?" she whispered. "Should I tell them to leave it on?" Charlie asked softly. "Please," the girls begged. Charlie backed away slowly with the uneaten banana bait. Once he felt certain he was not going to startle the insect, he raced down the hill. Just as Charlie came into view, Zahir stomped down on the switch and the lights turned off. Startled out of its trance, the moth noticed Santa. Trying to fly away quickly, one of the large wings knocked Amy and she lost her balance. For a split second, she tottered. Reaching towards the moth's body to steady herself, she fell forward. Suddenly, she realized the moth was taking to the air and she was on its back. Holding on tightly to the furry body, Amy quickly became airborne on the back of the giant moth. The air rushed past her as the large, graceful wings beat rhythmically on either side. Around the lake they flew, and Amy kept pleading, "Don't land on the water. Please don't land on the water." She could well imagine the splash they might make, and she didn't want to swim all the way back to land, even if the lake was completely still at night. Thankfully, the moth didn't want to land on the water any more than she did. For the first few moments, Amy was fearful. But slowly, she began to enjoy the ride. She had always wanted to fly, and now she was. The air rushed past her, blowing back her long hair in billowing waves and sending all the ribbons on her old sundress dancing. Moonlight shimmered in the water below, and she could see a giant shadow advancing along with them. The ride was so smooth, so exhilarating, and so fast. "This is how colors feels to soar up above," she thought with delight. Looking around at the fabulous view of paradise, she realized, and this is what he sees. Up on the hill, Santa had raced after Charlie to find Zahir and Georgia. "Amy's riding the moth," she told them all breathlessly. "Really?" Charlie replied in disbelief. "No fair. I would do anything for a ride." Zahir ran to the clearing to have a look. In the moonlight, it was easy to see the moth swooping over the lake with Amy kneeling on its back. "Turn the lights on," Santa suggested. "Maybe it will fly back and we can all take turns." "But Zahir promised the Beach Boys that he'd turn them off," Georgia insisted. Santa placed her hands on her hips and replied sassily, "But did he tell anyone he wouldn't turn them back on?" Zahir ran to the switch and stamped on the button. Amy saw the lights flicker and hoped the moth would return to the hill, but it seemed to be losing altitude. While it turned towards the glow on Rainbow Hill, it was slowly drawing closer and closer to the ground. They flew over the orchard, skimming just above the trees, and then the moth headed for Cascading Mountain. Suddenly, they landed on the lower section of the rock cliff in a vertical position. It was very fortunate that the moth landed at the bottom of the cliff and not near the top, as Amy immediately slid off and fell in a heap on the ground. Once the moth felt the heavy weight slide off its back, it took to the air again, heading straight for the little lights twinkling above. Picking herself up, Amy saw that she was near Uncle Louie's cabin. She ran to his door and knocked hard, hoping to tell him all about her experience, but no one answered. "Maybe he's talking to the professor," she surmised. Lately, Uncle Louie had been spending much more time in the cave than ever before. Running towards Rainbow Hill, Amy met Uncle Louie on his way out of the valley. Excitedly, she launched into her tale of flying around paradise on the back of the Luna moth. Uncle Louie was astounded. "You flew on a moth?" He could hardly believe it. "So that's why the lights are on?" he asked with a smile. "You are attracting the moth." "That's what we learned in school," she reminded him. "Yes, you did," he chuckled. "I'm glad you were listening. Well, let's go see if your flying friend will come back." With Amy leading the way, Uncle Louie slowly followed her up the hill, huffing and puffing. Taking his arm, she helped him along. By the time they reached the clearing, the moth had returned and was crawling on the copper wire. Many tinies had been drawn to the action. The Beach Boys were eager to join in. Charlie was carefully approaching the insect. "Charlie wants the next ride," Zahir whispered as Uncle Louie came close. It was a rather risky stunt, but Uncle Louie could appreciate the thrill of flying. Since Amy had survived, he felt assured that it couldn't be too dangerous. I wouldn't mind a ride myself, he said. Once Charlie had mounted the insect, he sat waiting for it to fly, but there was no reaction. I'll turn the lights off, Zahir offered, running towards the pathway. Zahir ran back down and flipped the switch. Sure enough, once the lights were off, Charlie and the moth flew up into the air and circled around. The other teens watched in astonishment, hoping they also would get a turn. When Charlie came back, Santa had a glorious ride, and then Zahir. Amy watched with the others as the pale green moth took Zahir up into the air and then soared down to the lake. However, this time the moth skimmed perilously close to the still water. The girls gasped, and Amy wrung her hands together nervously. Oh no, she said, Zahir can't swim. I think the moth is getting tired, Uncle Louis observed anxiously. They all watched with bated breath as the moth carried Zahir toward the shore. There was a collective sigh of relief when it landed on the beach. I think we should let it rest, Uncle Louis stated firmly. We've had a lot of fun for one night. On top of Rainbow Hill, everyone saw Zahir jump up and down with his hands in the air. He shouted, "That was spectacular!" Then he raced back up. "That was the best ride ever," he cheered, reaching the hilltop. "Weren't you scared when you almost landed in the water?" Georgia asked. "A little," Zahir admitted. "But it was amazing to fly so fast and so smoothly." He turned to Uncle Louis and begged, "Can we make flying machines? How do we make wings like that?" With a laugh, Uncle Louis looked at Zahir affectionately. "I'll look into it for you," he promised. "I'll see if it's possible." Cheering merrily, Santa whirled around. Lima added his own dance moves. Damien outshone both of them with a few backward flips in the air. The others looked at one another in disbelief. Was it possible to make flying machines? Leaving the lights off, the teens went to bed, dreaming of the newfound thrill and hoping to experience it again the next night. Chapter 25. A Mystery. "What happened to the butterflies and moths?" the professor called out to Evan. They had arrived early before classes that morning to make sure everything was okay. An evening conference at the biome had kept them from physically checking on the dome for the last 12 hours. "They are life-size," Evan replied, astounded, seeing large, colorful insects scattered all over the farmland. "That Luna moth floating in the water looks wider than my hand span." "Salors, and they look dead," the professor exclaimed. "We sent them in only yesterday morning. Don't they usually last a few days?" "Not much more than that," Evan agreed, "but one day is exceptionally brief." "So they grew to full size, and they only lasted one day," the professor pondered thoughtfully. "Yet we hypothesized that if it was possible for the DNA to revert back to its natural state, it would slow down the aging process." "That blows our hypothesis," Evan nodded. Then he considered, unless there is another reason they died so quickly. Noticing one of the butterflies was still fluttering, Evan pointed it out. "Look over by the store. That one is still moving." "It looks like it might be having convulsions," the professor said, squinting his eyes. They both walked to the east side where they could peer into the orchards and have a closer view of the store. Indeed, the blue morpho butterfly was twitching uncontrollably. At that moment, Nancy came out of the store. She was devastated to see the quivering butterfly and began to cry when she looked around. Giant insects lay dead all over Paradise. "If these were higher-order animals, seizures could indicate that the oxygen content is too rich," Evan suggested. "But I doubt this would affect insects." Stroking his goatee thoughtfully, the professor mused. "Early death could be a result of high oxygen levels. I'm wondering if perhaps the miniaturization process failed to take effect." Nancy ran over to Uncle Louie's cabin. The researchers watched as she pounded on his door, sobbing. When he answered, she begged him to come help the dying blue butterfly. "Oh, no," Uncle Louie exclaimed as he stepped outside and took in the sad scene. He ran over to the quivering insect. The researchers watched as he brought the butterfly some water and tried to get it to drink. When no response came from the pitiful creature, he and Nancy turned and began looking to see if they could help any others. Amy came wandering down from Rainbow Hill with colors on her shoulder. 3 deer were following her through the forest. As soon as she came to the beach and saw the beautiful Luna moth in the water, she burst out, "Not the Luna moth! Oh no, it can't be dead! Did we kill it?" In tears, she began running to the farmland where she met Uncle Louie and Nancy. "We shouldn't have been riding it," she wailed. Outside the dome, Evan gasped quietly. They were riding the moth? The professor looked at Evan in astonishment, imagining the scene. "Oh la la, I wish we were there to see that," he said. Evan and Professor Lemans heard Uncle Louie tell the two girls, No, I don't think we killed it. All the butterflies are dead." Putting his arms around them, he suggested an explanation. Maybe they grew too big. The early morning commotion woke up many of the tinies, and soon they were all pouring out of their homes. As sad as it was to see the dead butterflies, they were also fascinated to look closely at their beautiful colors and designs. Vanitha and Georgia were especially compelled to examine them. They ran into the creative shop to fetch some thick paper in order to paint the stunning patterns. "This can be the next story," Georgia exulted. Lily piped up, "I thought you were going to do the spider heroes." "Maybe I can do the butterfly story," Vanitha suggested quietly. Georgia frowned. "But I'm the book writer," she protested. A tiff broke out amongst the girls as Uncle Louie picked up the smallest of the giant insects and carried it to the train. On the other side of the glass, Professor Lemans nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Louie," he said to himself, watching the tinies try to fit the moth carefully through the door without ruining its wings. "You know we will need to do an investigation here on the other side." Glancing at his watch, the professor realized he had only 20 minutes until his first class began. Picking up the black journal on his desk, he began recording the details. March 6th, he wrote at the top of the page. While Evan watched the tinies collect the remaining dead creatures and take them into the forest to decompose, the professor scribbled notes on his lined page. Georgia and Vanitha were still arguing about the books. Looking up at Evan, the professor asked, "Any ideas on what happened to these insects?" "Do you think it's the radiation again?" Evan questioned. "I do recall that when I was moving the chrysalis to put them on the train, you called me into the lab." "Yes, that's right. I had a glitch in my computer program that you helped me sort out." With a shrug, Evan relayed, "I walked past the irradiator with every single chrysalis in my hand." Looking up with excitement, Jax declared, "It must be. That was what happened to the sunflower." Then his excitement quickly turned to dismay. He shook his head. None. It was turned off. We weren't using the gamma ray when you came into the lab." He stroked his goatee thoughtfully, saying, "I don't believe the gamma ray irradiator would leak radiation if it wasn't in use." "We should at least check it out," Evan protested. "Perhaps only the smallest amount is required."